Day 43 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Not a self-help guru, just trying to help myself. Well, day 42 was quite interesting for me as I was liberally, no pun intended, attacked on another app where people post videos that are for me and for you. And those comments tend to be of the variety that I have pointed out before, which are, you can't be ignoring the Trump administration if you're busy posting videos about it. This tells me that this little experiment is having an effect, a positive effect, because it is bringing out those people who, even though my message is 98.3245% about us and our perseverance and our optimism and realism in the face of the chaotic administration that is supposed to be leading our country. The fact that we are persevering, the fact that we have a plan, the fact that we are putting our feet on the ground and saying, no. You got to do what you got to do, but we are going to do what we are going to do. The fact that these people represent the chaotic administration that is trying to undermine our prosperity and joy, that they get in my comments and try to bring me down, well, I welcome it because it lets me know that they have not watched that video, they have not understood that message, but they have understood that whatever is going on in their life, they would like to bring that misery to me, and they can bring it because it only makes me more resilient. It only allows me the opportunity to be faced with what could be, but could very well be a bot, could very well be someone in some room in some foreign land who's in charge of trying to bring down people that might be speaking up. But whatever they are, if they are in a foreign land or they are just across the street, they are attempting to undermine my joy and therefore undermine your joy as I continue to post these videos about, one, not letting misinformation, disinformation, and just simply ugly information seep into our souls and lives, and to, two, take that time we regain by not allowing that to happen and by letting that fall off and by letting ourselves be realistic and optimistic people, to take that extra time and energy and bring it to our friends and family and loved ones and new friends and new family and new loved ones that we make along the way, and to make their lives better. So whoever is in their basement leaving those comments, well, you go ahead and do that. And to those who are leaving positive comments, I have to thank you for continuing to inspire me and continuing to motivate me, as I hope to motivate you to continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 44 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Not a self-help guru, baby. Just trying to help myself. When I thought about day 44, I thought about Reggie Jackson, famed baseball player of the New York Yankees, who I grew up watching. And I thought about my childhood and how that was an innocent time until it wasn't. And that's kind of what we're going through right now. You know, tonight is the State of the Union address. And if you did not know that, please continue to not know that, because I will not be protesting by not watching. I'm just not going to be not watching because I don't put in the energy to watch someone who I know is going to lie to me, gaslight me, as the parlance has led us to calling lying and manipulation. It's combined lying and manipulation into that word gaslighting, but you know what I'm talking about. This is someone whose voice will penetrate our souls, and we do not want that. I know that sounds hyperbolic. I know that sounds over the top, but let me reel it back into a approach that might seem a little bit more holistic and realistic and down to earth. You don't put yourself in the presence of someone you don't trust. You don't put yourself in the presence of someone who repeatedly tells you things that when you hear them, you just say to yourself, that don't make a whole lot of sense. You don't continually put yourself in the way of harm. And that is what the Trump administration is doing right now. It is harming us, even if a year from now, we all look back and go, wow, life is pretty damn great. I was mistaken. Well, I will tell you this right now, There are people who go to couples therapy and somehow they save their marriages and somehow they do look back and say, wow, I'm glad we did that because now things are much better. Well, I am an open minded person and I am open to that possibility. But right now, the beatings are continuing. And if they are continuing, that's when you pack up that car and you drive away. And you don't drive away in haste. You drive away because that situation is not serving you. That situation is bringing you down. And therefore, tonight, I'm not going to be watching the State of the Union address to say, hey, look at me. I'm not watching the State of the Union address. I'm going to not watch the State of the Union address because that is what is appropriate when, let's say you're a person who has kids. Let's say you're a person who has aging parents. They want you to spend that time and energy with them. They don't want you to be paying attention to the Trump administration. Day 45 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru, just trying to help myself. Well, I am actually shooting this on day 44 before the State of the Union address because I am curious to see on day 45 if the world is just a slightly bit altered and what this video would be like on the next day after that happens. A feeling that this speech tonight, which I will not be watching, will bring us further to the bottom. And as I have said before, I believe that going to the bottom is the only way that we are going to be able to build this country back up. Because as you may know, this country was founded in G and founded in R. And I am not talking about guns and roses. I am talking about genocide. I'm talking about racism. And the fact of the matter is that until we as a people confront these things and atone for those original sins, well, it just will continue now, won't it? Now, I take a lot of satisfaction and solace in the fact that Kamala Harris came very close to winning the election, and I believe it represents the fact that the vast majority of this country does want diversity and equality and equity. And you might say, well, Josh, then if that's true, then why did she lose? Well, the fact of the matter is 1/3 of this country doesn't vote. And I refuse to believe as a human being walking on this planet that 1/3 of this country doesn't vote just because they do not believe in those values that we hold dear, the values that are not embodied by the Trump administration. And how do we know they're not embodied by the Trump administration? Because they're busy trying to strip those rights away, baby. So in order to get to where we want to go as a people, they're going to have to expose in the harsh light of day all of the horrible things that have represented the underbelly of this country for so many years. And I do believe this can happen, but not without a little bit of pain and suffering. When you rip that Band-Aid off and that toupee goes flying, or whatever the hell that is going on his head, that cotton candy made of piss, according to Penn from Penn and Teller, so eloquently put, and he would know because he was on that Celebrity Apprentice and had his rightful win stripped from him just because, as we know, the leader of the Trump administration does not like it when you are not on his side. So anyway, back to ignoring the Trump administration. I just want to remind you that number one, you should be reclaiming your time and reclaiming your mind by not absorbing so much information that will just drive you crazy, and to use that time, use that extra energy to help your fellow man and ignore the Trump administration. Day 46 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just here to help myself. Well, the other night at the State of the Union address, the Congressman Al Green stood up and was thrown out. And in tribute to him, I am outside today for the first time during these days of ignoring the Trump administration. And I have to hand it to Mr. Green for surpassing the singer Al Green in notoriety. Because of his actions, he stands alone as being the one demonstrator against the Trump administration during the State of the Union address. Now, I know there were people holding up signs like lie, like go to hell, or eat my ass or something like that. But the fact of the matter is only Mr. Green was righteous enough to stand up and get thrown out. Now, do I think that Democrats making some grand show and grand gesture is going to do a damn thing? Probably not. But I have been thinking this morning about the fact that before I was born, people in this country and elsewhere lived through very, very, very difficult times and circumstances, and I guess it is now our turn, but I take solace in the fact that I believe that we will survive this, and that people like the leader of the Trump administration and the people who would follow such a leader have come along plenty of times in the past to try to do their nefarious business because they have dark souls and empty hearts that are in need of fulfillment, and the way that they have decided to fulfill them is with the Lord and lording over other people. And they can certainly try, like they did to Mr. Al Green, but he stood up and was summarily thrown out. Do you hear these birds behind me? Because it is important to acknowledge the fact that those birds are also ignoring the Trump administration, and we should be like those birds. We should fly free and be free, even though we can't physically do so. We must do so in our minds and hearts. So once again, I remind you here as I walk outside on this track on this sort of gloomy day that probably will get sunny very soon, just like our lives, just like our existence here in this country. I remind you to try to do your best to train your mind to not take in so much information that it clouds your ability to enjoy your day and to enjoy the day that is brought to you by other people that you love and care about. And so you can put that energy back out in art, cooking, cobbling. If you're into making shoes, I suggest that you do exactly that, because people need shoes. And if you are consumed and overwrought and undermined with the nefarious actions of the Trump administration, you cannot make shoes. So please ignore the Trump administration, make shoes, and ignore the Trump administration. Day 47 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru, just here to help myself. We are experiencing the most significant manifestation of a crisis of masculinity in our lifetimes. I grew up with Charles Ingalls of Little House on the Prairie as my male role model, not my fucking father, and he seemed pretty goddamn masculine to me. We are ignoring a group of men and some women called the Trump administration who believe that treating other people like garbage is what being a man is about. They believe that is what showing strength is about. I think of Alexei Navalny, who sacrificed his life fighting Vladimir Putin. I think of all of the civil rights workers who sacrificed their lives for justice. And here we are seeing men and women celebrated who would put those people down, who would put those people to their end because they perceive preying on empathetic people as strength. And before anyone brings up whataboutism, there is a difference between those who make mistakes and account for them and those who make mistakes and are proud of them. Empathy is strength. Using one's wealth and power to help others is strength. What we are seeing are men who are small in stature, small in their hearts, and small in their minds, who instead of seeking to improve themselves and therefore the world around them, seek to bring others down to their level. They will not. I will receive comments from these types of men that try to denigrate me personally in every way that they can conjure with their tiny thoughts. They will not. These people will let their misery guide them to do what they have to do. I am enjoying doing what I have to do. They will not. Day 48 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. You know, yesterday I heard someone say that Doge could be a useful organization if it weren't headed up by a partisan asshole. And when I heard someone call Elon Musk a partisan asshole, it made me laugh, because it's not a subjective matter. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are, how rich you are, what position you are. If you don't have any empathy for the fact that your behavior and your actions are throwing people's lives into chaos, then that's what you are. If the impact of your behavior is real, if the impact of your behavior ends up being imagined, it doesn't matter because the fact is that the way you are behaving is throwing lives into chaos. And in this case, throwing millions of lives into chaos, millions of people wondering what their future holds. And if you don't care about that, and even if you are tasked with cleaning up the waste and fraud and abuse in government, which could be a valid thing to do, even if you are tasked with that and you don't come out and say, hey, I know that this is going to create chaos for people or create uncertainty, and I want to be here to address that because that is not something I am willing to accept as part of the job I'm doing. I am not willing to accept people's lives being thrown into chaos and uncertainty this way, and so because I'm trying to do a job, I am going to take on the responsibility of making sure that I am keeping people aware of what's going on and keeping them informed and calm and keeping them confident in my abilities to lead. When you don't do that, you're one thing, and that's an asshole. Day 49 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. You know, the scariest thing about someone like the leader of the Trump administration is the ability to both lie and have no shame. If you can be a compulsive liar and have no shame, you win. You become the president of the United States and a billionaire, or a billionaire on paper. This is something that is both a skill and a life choice. If you were born into money, the kind of money that the leader of the Trump administration was born into, then you have a lens on the world that is unlike the lens on the world that basically the entire population of the planet has. Period. You are someone who has no idea what it is like to not be a privileged billionaire. And so lying and having no shame about your lies is not something that you even stop to consider as a debilitating factor in your existence. If you are even aware that you are a shameless liar, you believe that lying and having no shame about your lying is what maintains and grows your power and wealth. There is no interest in becoming a better person. There is no interest in helping other people to become better human beings because you have no understanding of what being a better human being is. You can only develop your understanding of becoming better through the lens of how it allows you to leverage the power and wealth you already have into more power and wealth while also becoming more comfortable with lying and abandoning shame in order to manipulate and take advantage of anyone and anything that will further those goals which you see as your reason for living. This is why we must continue to ignore the Trump administration, because these behaviors by these types of people can poison our minds and undermine our ability to do what many of us, unlike the leader of the Trump administration, make a priority in our lives, which is to become better, more empathetic, more compassionate, more loving, joyous, helpful, understanding people. Let's continue to ease ourselves away of the constant chaos of inbound information in order to free up our minds and our time to do the things I just mentioned and to pursue the versions of ourselves that we can become when we ignore the Trump administration. Day 50 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. You know, there is a certain solace one can take in knowing that every public official who is part of the Trump administration that gives any kind of public statement is telling some variation on the truth, be it an exaggeration, a distortion, or an outright lie. Why would one be able to take solace in such a thing? Well, first of all, we're not supposed to be taking in too much of this information to begin with because it eats up too much of our valuable time. But when we are confronted with it in passing, because as you know, if you are a person on this planet who is immersed in the functional world around you, you will be interacting with information. The reason we can take solace in this is because it is reliable. And what can we really rely on these days? What is stable? Being able to know that consistently we are being confronted with falsehoods, it allows us to say, well, it's not true anyway, and I don't care to find out what shred of truth is in this. And in fact, I can probably assume that what I just heard very well may be completely made up, just like eating cats and dogs was completely made up. And with that, it allows us to step away into a day, step away into a life that is not encumbered with nonsense. There is plenty of other nonsense to deal with in this world, and that has nothing to do with the Trump administration. So why should we add to that nonsense with the fantasies, the delusions, and the sociopathic thinking and behavior of the members of the Trump administration and their disturbed leader? Keep on ignoring the Trump administration. Keep using the time that you regain from doing that to help yourself and help your neighbors and help your loved ones enjoy their time in the sun, and keep ignoring the Trump administration. Day 51 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I saw footage of protesters in support of Ukraine confronting J.D. Vance on the street, and he put on this "I'm being confronted on the street by protesters" posture, like I'm going to stop and speak to them, fully knowing that they're filming, so I will give my reasonable, I'm an everyman attitude. I don't want to be completely cynical, because cynicism is worth tempering while ignoring the Trump administration. JD manages to admit that Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, which is not a position I would ever expect him to state ever again in any sort of official capacity. He's then asked about calling the leader of the Trump administration America's Hitler 10 years ago. To this, he replies, "You want me to explain how my viewpoint on Donald Trump has changed over 10 years? Now, look, people evolve. And when they do, our opinions about those people can also evolve. If someone you know behaved badly in their youth and then evolved, and your opinion of them evolved, you could explain how your opinion evolved based on how you saw their behavior evolve." This comment J.D. Vance made 10 years ago was not about someone's bad behavior in their youth. It was about someone he thought of as quote-unquote America's Hitler. Did you ever know anyone whose behavior evolved to where you no longer thought of them as America's Hitler? I don't think so, because that doesn't happen. Also, when JD said this, the leader of the Trump administration was already an old man. He wasn't misbehaving in his youth. So, there's J.D. Vance putting on that "I'm just a dude on the street" face, pretending he's just like you while he's having his conversation about the 70-something-year-old man that he referred to as America's Hitler 10 years ago, who has now managed to change into the guy J.D. spends his days and nights validating and encouraging to dismantle the country as the Vice President of the United States. I'm not buying it. You shouldn't either. Please continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 52 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Last night I heard a supporter of the Trump administration say that people who are seeking asylum, trying to escape the country they're in because they are persecuted, their lives are threatened by murderous dictators, their freedom is subject to authoritarian regimes, should just quote-unquote somehow band together to fight those regimes, rather than coming here as if when Jews were escaping Europe, like my grandparents, for example, they should have just band together to fight the Reich instead of trying to escape here for a better life. It makes me think about how privileged we are as Americans in the year 2025. We often forget how lucky we are to have been born in America, where there is this level of freedom that we enjoy for now. The supporter of the Trump administration seems to think we are not living on, at worst, stolen land, and at best, a planet that all people should share with one another, because ultimately it is the planet that is sharing itself with us. I have mentioned the documentary Beyond Utopia about North Korea many times. It is a fascinating, incredible documentary that is very entertaining to watch, but it is also upsetting. It is about a family fleeing North Korea, and it goes into great detail about what it is like to live in North Korea, where you could very well lose your life or be sent away to hard labor forever if you speak against the government. Free speech is not a thing anybody even knows about there. We are inundated with dum-dums at the moment, and it is incumbent upon us to use the privilege that we have to ignore the Trump administration and the people who align with and believe in and find normalization of their intolerant ideologies within the Trump administration. I am continuing to diminish the amount of interaction I have with people who do not have an understanding of how lucky they are, and therefore do not understand how unlucky some other people are. Let's keep using that regained energy and reclaimed time to love ourselves, our families, and our neighbors, and to continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 53 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. No. I'm just trying to help myself. Well, today I am speaking to supporters of the Trump administration. That's why I'm in bed. It makes me sick. I'm just kidding. Today, Donald Trump was outside the White House, right in front of there, doing a sales meeting or sales pitch or whatever one would do at a car dealership, except it was not a car dealership. It was the White House. And what was he doing? What kind of cars was he selling? Coincidentally, he was selling Teslas, the car that is sold, made, headed up. I don't know what the hell Elon Musk does over there at Tesla, but it's Elon's car, which, how convenient that Elon's the guy who's firing everyone in the government and at Donald Trump's behest, but also, quote unquote, running a car company, which is in financial freefall. And how convenient for Donald Trump, the president of the United States, to be out there selling his cars for him. Isn't that nice? Most people out there in the world are like saying, that's illegal. I don't even give a flying fuck about that part. I am addressing Trump administration supporters. Don't you guys find it to be kind of irritating that these two billionaires are out there spending your tax dollars to sell cars, to make more money, cars that you probably can't buy, to just enrich themselves? Doesn't it annoy you? Because I would say it annoys the shit out of me because it's not right. Now, don't you have feelings about something just not being right? I'm not talking about illegal. I'm talking about it just ain't right. One thing I like to point out to supporters of the Trump administration is that there is one certifiable, verifiable thing that Donald Trump has been successful at in life that no one can take away from him. And that is being a con man, a confidence man. That's what con man is short for. And that job of a con man is to get the confidence of people to believe in what he's telling them, to believe that the lies he tells them are true. You don't want to be his mark. You don't want to be it. So I'm asking you to please join me in ignoring the Trump administration and Tesla, too. Ignore the fuck out of Tesla. That dude's a douche.